Hi, today we're going to talk about wheels. We're going to be fitting our Yamaha 450 up with W wheels, which are Talon hubs and DID rims with the Bulldog spoke and nipple kit that W sells. Honestly, W has about the best wheels out right now. They carry many different brands of hubs and rims. We chose the Talon hub with the DID rim. I'm a huge fan of DID rims, have been for a long time. I think they build a great product, and the Talon hubs are obviously a good product. They're all billet, made from a solid piece of billet aluminum and machined down. The rear wheel is similar to the front. It's a DID rim with Bulldog spoke and nipple kit, and Talon the Pro Billet hub, which is a great hub. If you purchase the Talon Pro Billet hub, you get the sprocket bolts and your rotor bolts, which you can lace up a whole wheel, have the disc and sprocket, still have your stock wheel, which you could use for a practice wheel or whatever, use these for race. It just opens up many doors working with W and having a different set of wheels. Obviously stronger hubs, maybe a little bit heavier, but with the strength, I would give up a little bit of weight for the strength. And the front comes with front rotor bolts, and obviously you're going to need the Bulldog spoke wrench. It's a little bit different. So your standard or normal spoke wrench is not going to work. You're going to need to have the Bulldog one. So I think next stop is down in the shop, and we're going to put these on the motorcycle and see how they fit. We're down here in the Chaparral shop. We're going to install our W wheel sets with Talon hubs and DID rims. And we're going to mix in the Galfer discs, the Tsunami discs. We're going to install the discs onto the hub and then put the tires on the wheel sets and then install them on the bike. So let's get started and see how it goes. So we're going to start with our front wheel. We have our W wheel set, front wheel with the DID rim and Talon hub. We have our 270 millimeter Galfer Tsunami front disc, and we have the hardware that comes with the front wheel. We've sat all three items out here, and we're going to install the disc onto the hub. First thing you're going to do is take your blue Loctite, and we're going to put a drop on the threads. And we're going to do that with all 5 bolts. After you get the Loctite put on to all the bolts, set them aside, and then put your Galfer disc in place. Try to get it centered. It's not that important. The bolts will center it. Then you could take your bolts and just start them a couple threads in. Start them by hand so you know you're not going to cross thread them. Now that we have all 5 of our disc bolts started, we're going to take our 5 Allen and run these down. You might want to hang on to the rim with your other hand. Don't tighten them down yet, just snug them up a bit. Make sure that you center the disc by the countersunk heads dropping into these countersunk holes. It'll get the disc in the right position. And go in a cross pattern also. You just make sure that you don't get anything out of whack or torqued down wrong. Once you have them snugged down, just give them a nice little tighten. This isn't the final tighten, so you don't have to get them crazy tight here. Now we're moving to our rear wheel. We are going to put our Galfer Tsunami rear disc onto our Talon hub. We're going to use the hardware that W provided for us.
The bolts already have Loctite on them, so we're not going to have to put our blue Loctite on these. Now we're going to place the disc onto the hub and again center it over the holes. Then take each bolt and start it a couple threads. Now the same process with the front wheel. We've started them a couple threads in, and now we're going to drop our wrench on them and tighten up each bolt. And remember, just snug it down to begin with. Don't over tighten. This is not the final tighten here on the bench. Since we don't have a centering ring around the inside of the disc has a bit of a tolerance here, and you can tell by just wiggling it a tad. So you don't want your disc to be out of round with the hub. So what I'd do is, with the bolts just snugged up a bit, able to move the disc, I rotate the disc forward so it finds its center. Once you do that, then you can do your tighten. And again, you want to tighten in a crisscross pattern. Now we're tightening these rear disc bolts a little bit more than we did with the front because of the self-centering. We're going to start on our rear wheel and taking it off the bike. So push your wheel down to the ground and loosen the axle nut. Once you break it loose, spin it off with your hands, pull the washer and the chain adjuster block off, and then tap your axle out. And then you can take your chain off the rear sprocket and slide your rear wheel right out. So we're going to reuse the sprocket that's on the standard wheel. We're going to pull it off real quick. To take the tire off, first thing we're going to do is loosen the rim lock. Then we're going to take the air out of the tube. We're going to use a stem tool and take the core out of the stem. I like to leave the nut on the valve stem and just run it up to the top, just the same as the rim lock. Now we need to break the bead, and now we're going to put our tire tools inside between the rim and the bead and push down on the other side of the tire and break it loose. Now at this point, everyone has their own way to do it. They continue to take the bead off the same side. I like to take it off the other side. So we'll flip the tire over and take the bead off of the other side, the disc side. Now, with the tire on both sides, find the low spot, so the rim's sitting at the lowest spot inside the tire. When you've done that, you can move to the side and peel the rim right out. First, we're going to take our rim lock off of our standard rim, place it into our DID rim, take the nut and the washer and put them in place. Just two threads on, 3 threads on. Now with that in place, we're going to set it aside. We're going to take our tube and we're going to put it into the tire. We still haven't replaced the valve stem core, so we've got an open hole in our valve stem. We're going to take our air and we're just gonna blow it up, and the tube's gonna center itself. After the air all comes out of the tube, we're gonna wanna replace our valve stem. So you wanna do that with the tube completely flat. You don't need to push on it or push the air out. Maybe just push down on the tire, but leave the tube a little bit fluffy. Now we'll take our rim and we're going to center and slide the valve stem into the rim. Then you could take your nut and put a couple turns on it, a couple threads on, just so it doesn't try to get back out. And then by hand, you want to push the rim onto the bead of the tire as much as you can. You're not going to get it all the way, but you can get it quite a ways. Now with our rim lock, we're going to start working the bead onto the tire. And you have your rim lock there, so you're going to have to get over your rim lock. Once you do that, pick your wheel up, and you're going to have to get the bead over the rim lock. I usually put a tire tool on each side of the rim lock. Pull the tire up a bit. Takes a little finesse here. Okay. And then do the same like you're taking the tire off the rim. Just kind of pop it over the bead there. We're going to need 2 of them. One side's on. Now make sure that your valve stem is straight. So just kind of spin the tire a little bit. Push around on your stem just to make sure nothing's catching inside there. And now we can start putting the bead on this side. Now I like to start at the rim lock just on one side. So the first thing I do is drop it behind that rim lock. Now take small bites with your tire tools here. You don't want to pinch your tube. Once you get about halfway, go back and push your bead on to make sure it drops down into the rim a bit, so you can have a little more leverage and the bead will slip over. And then go back to it. Small bites with your tire tool. Don't get crazy. The bigger the bite you try to take, the harder it is to get it over the rim. Make sure you push up on the other side of the tire, on the back side of the tire also. Just makes this assembly a little easier. When you are putting your bead on and you're taking a bite of the bead and working around the rim, never take your tire tool all the way to the stop. Always try to stop about halfway. That'll keep the spoon of the tire tool digging into the tube and pinching it between the rim and the spoon of the tire tool. Normally when people pinch their tube, that's the cause. So if you stop halfway, the bead will still go on, but you won't run the risk of pinching your tube. Now that we have everything back on the rim, we're gonna throw a little air in there. I'm just gonna use an air nozzle to begin with, and I'm gonna push down the valve stem core. As you can see, just by using the air nozzle, we were able to break the bead, put the bead back on the rim. So we're not going to go put any more air in at this point. Now we're going to put the sprocket onto the hub. We're going to put it in place. We're going to drop our bolts in. And now we're going to take our nut and our washer. I just lay the washer on top of the nut, put it between two fingers, reach around the back side, and then start it. Just continue to do that around the sprocket. We just want to get them all started and ready to be tightened down. Okay, we've got our sprocket tightened up. Now that we have our wheel completely assembled, we can slide it back into the swing arm. Now with the wheel back into the swing arm, back on the motorcycle, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to tighten all my bolts, check them and tighten them if needed. You always want to go over your bolts just to make sure that everything's tightened up, especially sprocket bolts. It's very common if a sprocket bolt comes loose, the hub could break, and it just works itself and ovals the holes out and then ends up breaking the hub. So keeping your sprocket bolts tight is very important. I'm actually holding with my Allen wrench and ratchet and 12 wrench and then putting my knee on the tire just so the tire doesn't spin. Be easier if I had a second person holding the brake, but I don't, so I just use my knee. Now we're going to tighten our rim lock. Now that we've got the wheel back in place on the swing arm, just roll your nut back and tighten the rim lock down. You don't need to over tighten the rim lock, just make sure you get it nice and snug, because the rim lock is pinching the rubber between the tire, between the rim lock and the rim. So it's pinching rubber. So that's why it feels like it never really gets tight. But it has ribs in the rim lock and they dig into the rubber and keeps it secure. So we're good there. Now we're going to check the air pressure. We have 15 now. And we're going to put 12 PSI in the tire. Now we're going to install the valve stem cap. This lock nut, just back it down a little bit, screw your cap on, and don't screw your nut to the rim. A lot of people do that, I see it all the time, and then when the tire does slip, it rips the valve stem off the tube. Just roll the nut up and tighten it against the cap. Now we're going to move on to the front wheel. Start by taking the nut off the front axle. Then loosening the pinch bolts. Loosen the pinch bolts on the opposite side of the disc. And then tap your axle out. Now that we have our front wheel taken off the Yamaha 450, we've laid it on the ground and we are going to loosen the rim lock. Just loosen it all the way to the top of the threads. Rotate the tire. We can take the valve stem core out now. Loosen the nut on the valve stem all the way to the top, but leave it on. Just leave a couple threads on. Now push the rim lock away from the tire. That'll break it free of the tire. Make sure it's free. And then push down with both hands and your knee and try to break the bead. Now we'll flip the tire over. And we're going to do the same with the other side. This side should be easier since the other bead is already broken. But it's not. We're going to take our tire tool, get underneath the rim, and the bead is broken. And just work around the tire, taking the bead off. Get the bead completely off the rim. We're going to flip the tire over and do the same to the other side. Again, people do this differently. I choose to do it this way. It's the way I learned. The goal is to get the tire on and don't pinch the tube. Okay. Lay the rim back here. We're just going to put the tube in the tire to begin with. Now we're going to put a little air into it. And that'll self-center the tube. Now we're bringing in our new wheel. We need to put the rim lock on it first. Do it there. And again, start our nut. Don't forget the washer. Just start the nut a couple threads on there so you have plenty of play. Slip the valve stem in. Get your lock nut and thread your lock nut onto the valve stem. Just, again, 2-3 threads. Set it in there. Make sure you push your rim lock in once you get everything in place. And now we're going to flip the tire over. We're going to start on the far side, and we're just going to lay the lid on. I do front and back tires different. But don't hate on me. Okay. Let's put our valve stem in now. Don't over tighten that valve core either. It's a little sensitive. Okay, everything's pretty free, so we can start putting the bead on. And again, we'll start at the rim lock. Remember, take small bites. Don't get ahead of yourself. You don't want to pinch that tube. Before we put our air back in our tire, I like to push the valve stem into the tire. The locking nut will keep it from dropping all the way in. And push your rim lock in also. Make sure it's moving freely and it's not catching against anything. And then just work around the tire and push the bead in. That'll kind of work out anything if your tube is pinched inside there anywhere. You want to prevent a flat tire before you're getting on the track, that's for sure. All right, so let's put a little air in this. Now that our bead is popped on the other side, we'll check the disc side and everything looks good. Valve stem looks straight. Rim lock was free. Now we can tighten our rim lock down, and we'll snug it down. Remember, don't over tighten it. It's going to feel mushy because it's squishing the tire between the rim and the rim lock. So just get it good and snug. We'll check the air pressure once we get the tire back on the motorcycle. I'll leave the valve cap loose just as a reminder. Now that we've changed from a standard 260 millimeter size disc to a 270 Galfer disc, we're going to need to change the brake hanger, which holds the front caliper on. That's done by just releasing these two bolts. We're just going to loosen them a little bit. Then we're going to take this cap off. There's an Allen bolt in there, 4 millimeter. We're going to loosen that up. And when you pull this out, your front brake pads are going to come out. So put your other hand underneath to catch your front brake pads, and you might need to actually push up on them a little bit. Now you can continue to take off the front brake caliper. We'll loosen the top one, it'll drop a bit, and loosen the bottom one, and it'll completely drop off the fork. We need to push the hanger off the caliper, which is very easy. It's just held by these centering pins, and you just push it straight off. We're going to need this rubber boot here, so we'll pull that out. We need to take this centering pin off the standard brake hanger, and that's done by a 12 wrench. Be careful when loosening this. There is some pieces on this hanger that are very sharp. They're steel pieces that the brake pads run on to keep the aluminum from wearing out. And these little edges are very, very sharp, so be very careful when doing this. We're going to need this piece also that we were just showing you, so we're going to pop it off also. Now we can just put our standard front brake hanger aside. We'll keep that. And we will pull our Galfer 270 brake hanger out. First thing we want to do is put the pin in this new 270 brake hanger, and we'll just thread it in, and we will get our 12 wrench and tighten her down. Something important here is these 270 brake hangers, they twist and bend fairly easy, so try not to put any side torque on it. And if you're really going to bear down on any bolts on it, put it in the bike, put it on the bike, put it in the lug itself and tighten it down. It'll keep it straighter. So now that we've got that, the centering pin in place, we're going to throw a little grease in here and then put our boot that came off the standard hanger. It's got a little recessed groove in there. It just pops straight in. Now we need to put this piece that the brake pads rub on, just snaps right there in place. Now we can slide this on to the standard brake caliper. Now that we have our brake hanger in place on our front brake caliper, we're going to take our brake pads and we're going to slide them right up in place, keeping them side by side, and they will sit right in that groove there where we popped in that little metal piece. Then we're going to take our pin, slide that in, Okay. Snug it up. We'll tighten it when we get it back on the bike. Now we're going to put our bolts back in. Do not over tighten these. Just snug them up. I've seen a lot of people get these in a bind and put pressure on them and they bend the hanger. So I'm just warning you, do not over tighten, do not put side torque on this. Now that we have the caliper back in place with the new brake hanger, now you're going to want to tighten this pin that holds your brake pads in. Slip it in there and snug them down good. Not over tighten, just now you want to take your cap, replace this cap. You don't want this to get all full of mud and junk when you're riding. Thread that on in. Make sure when you're tightening this also, put pressure on the backside and make sure your screwdriver is in there good and give it a good tighten. Now that we have our wheel completely put together with the disc and tire full of air and we have our 270 brake hanger on there, we are going to slide the front wheel back in. Get it centered, have your axle ready to go. And then take your nut, snug the nut down. Now we're going to want to make sure that the forks and wheel and everything are aligned. So we're going to put a little pressure and collapse the forks a little bit. And that'll center everything in the front end a little bit. I've seen people do it many different ways. They spin the front wheel and slam the front brake on or work the suspension up and down. I do that, but everyone has their own way of doing things. But the goal is to just get the front end aligned. So now we're going to tighten our axle a little bit. We're going to take a 10 wrench, tighten down these pinch nuts, pinch bolts on the bottom of the fork lug. Now you're going to want to take your 22 wrench and finish tightening the axle nut. And then you can finish tightening these pinch bolts. Okay, we just finished installing the wheel sets and the Galfer Tsunami discs, the 270 on the front and the standard size in the rear. Everything was pretty simple. I think you just need to take your time, make sure that you don't rush. It's a fairly straightforward process, and you have a spare set of wheels now. You just put your stock wheels aside, you have a spare set of wheels for practice and use these for racing or however you want to do it, but you can never beat having a spare set of wheels. So thanks for being here, thanks for watching, and we appreciate it. Don't forget, there are 3 ways that you can order here at Chaparral. You can call our 800 number, which is 800-841-2960. Go to our website, shapmoto.com, or just come on into our store and you'll be able to order whatever you need.